Okay, wonderful. Well, then I'd say let's get started. Like to welcome everybody around the globe. I know we have participants from Europe and from North America dialing in. There was quite a bit of interest from the Detroit Executive Stammtisch, which I appreciate. Then we have a couple of members from the German American Chamber of Commerce, and I want to thank the German American Chamber of Commerce for promoting our event and for allowing us to host it here. My name is Henning Bruns. I'm the Managing Director of ConMoto Americas. ConMoto Consulting has been around since 1990. As a matter of fact, we were all celebrating with our global headquarters yesterday our 30th anniversary. And we have been serving the automotive industry since 1990, throughout the world. Focusing mostly on operational excellence. We have worked on more than 1,000 companies by now and helped them to, get back to a higher efficiency and higher return on sales and driving their lean and operational excellence agenda. Since 2015, the company has been stronger, engaged in the US and in the Mexican market. And in 2018, we have decided to open up our office here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And that's where I am right now. I have today two gentlemen with me, Thomas Hartoon and Gizay Ünal. And I'd like to ask, first of all, Thomas to introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. As Henning said, my name is Thomas Hartoon. Greetings from beautiful Birmingham, Alabama, 70 Fahrenheit, about 21 Celsius. I've been in the automotive industry for more than 20 years, mostly process and project planning, as well as logistics and supply chain planning. I'm looking forward to a very fruitful and constructive discussion and webinar today with you all.
Thank you, Thomas. Appreciate it. I hand it over to Gizay.
Thank you, Henning, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gizay. I have been working at ConMoto for more than 6 years with focus on maintenance excellence and operational excellence, basically on projects in Europe, Asia, and North America. And I'm excited to be part of this event today. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Gizay. And then again, Henning Bruns, my name, basically, I've been 25 years in the automotive industry. I had the honor to head up a couple of engine and axle and truck manufacturing plants. ConMoto Consulting, we are not a big consulting company. We are roughly 100 people worldwide, but we believe that we bring a lot of expertise to our customers. Most of our people had a long-standing career as leaders in the mostly automotive industry, some in the chemical industry, process industry. And we tend to believe that we are, working eye to eye level with our customers and feel very comfortable being on the shop floor all the way to working with the C-level in the boardroom. So we would like to share a little bit on operational excellence today. But before we get started, a little bit on housekeeping to make this a great event. First of all, we'll put everybody on mute. So please, if for whatever reason you are unmuting, please go back to mute. We will have time for questions afterwards. If you want to get your question posted, please send a text to Suzanne at 704-604-3240. Just type your first name and maybe the town where you're from and the state, and then post your question. And we will then go through and afterwards and try to address most of them. If you did like the material of our presentation, go ahead and call her at the Charlotte office or send her an email, and we'll make sure that you get the material. The slides we're going to show is going to be mostly pictures. So we want to really invite you into the industrial world. So for best experience, if you see my talking screen here, and if you hover your mouse around it, you see these different signs here. Click on the middle one. And then you have only one speaking picture on your screen, and move it to the upper right side. That's where it's less disturbing. All right, let's get started. So operational excellence. What is operational excellence, and how do we get to operational excellence? And how do you know where you are on your path to operational excellence? Now, in operations, we tend to describe or evaluate our business with certain KPI clusters. SQDCM is one. So safety, of course, for the yes, it's super important that you pay attention. There's a lot of parts moving through a plant, and rather big and heavy parts also. So it's important that you engage your team into paying attention and proactively looking for certain hazards and potential hazards, and then jointly quickly mitigate and countermeasure these things. Quality is something which describes the happiness of our customers, to what extent the products are appreciated and they provide long-term reliability in the market. But it also represents the amount of rework you might have when your products are about to be finished. So quality is something we're going to cover today. Delivery for the D, this is all about getting parts to the plant. And if we talk about a car plant with several hundred cars per day, it's easily several million of parts coming from all parts of the globe, more or less, towards your plant. And this is excluding any nuts and bolts, just the major parts. So you want to make sure that you orchestrate this properly. We'll talk about this. And then internally, you want to convey these parts properly so that they are reaching the point of installation at just the time and needed. Cost is a major factor in what we do. Of course, we know this. From the production cost of a vehicle, about 50% is on the BOM side, about 30%, 25 to 30% is on the conversion cost, which is the labor and all the other variable costs. 15%, 10 to 15 on the fixed cost side, and then the remainder, of course, there should be some room for EBIT. So that's the cost side. And then the M stands for morale. Morale is what we believe is the most important lever in what we do, because morale embodies everything which your people are, experiencing. If other people felt recognized, do the people believe that they have a safe work environment? Do they feel understood, and is information shared in an appropriate way with them, right? Do you, as the leader of a facility, spend enough time with your people, and literally individually along the lines? That is all important. Ultimately, your team pays it back with attendance. If people are happy, they show great attendance and they drive the company ahead. So that's a little bit of a first step into operational excellence. What we also talk about, we describe our operational world with 3P stability. It's all about the parts. It's the availability of parts. It's the uptime of equipment or of processes, and it's the attendance of people. You can really only drive operational excellence if you achieve all three of them. If one is missing, let's say, for instance, parts are missing, chances are that you will not be able to finish every shift. You have to send people earlier home. You will have to make it up on the weekend, and ultimately this leads to an exhausting of your people, and the people will eventually pay you back and say, okay, I might be coming in over the weekend, but I will take either Monday or Friday off, which is not really helpful in that situation. So what I wanted to say is all these three things have to be there, and we will touch on these points going forward now. I hand it over to Thomas in Birmingham.
Speaking of one of the P's, the parts, the last 10, 15, or even 20 years, there has been a trend in automotive that the process, meaning the installation side, was optimized to a large extent. But a little known fact came up the last 2 or 3 years, I would say, that it does take, in terms of cost, as much to bring the parts to a plant than it does to assemble the parts into a car or a component for that matter. So supply chain or logistics or parts for that matter becomes a very important factor, as Henning has outlined earlier, in terms of your cost efficiency. So there have been a lot of methods that came into the market, as I said, the past couple of years, and ConMoto can help you implement them. There are AGVs, automated guided vehicles, which pretty much every automotive plant has a few applications. There are now AGTs, automated guided tuggers. There's AGLS, automated guided unloading systems. So that's basically a forklift that automatically, with no driver, can load and unload a trailer. There are other systems. There are supermarkets. You see that on the top right, where assembly team member can sequence or pre-assemble or kit 10 to 15 car sets, and then they are delivered either by AGV or another means to line side, and the assembly team member then just turns around, picks up the right part without any decision making, and assembles. So there are many, many methods nowadays to ensure the internal material flow inside a plant, but also the external material flow coming to the plant, and make sure that that process is robust as well as efficient. Last item I want to mention is that there's many also error proving or Pokayoki systems. You see in the bottom middle, you see a scanner, but there's nowadays more elaborate systems through RFID, active or passive, or Bluetooth technology, that the system itself recognizes that the right part makes it to the right process. With that, going back to Henning, please.
Thanks, Thomas. I want to hand it over to Gisai now, talking about processes, because it is very relevant that processes are kept up and leading to no surprises. So Gisai is an expert on maintenance in our company, and he will share a couple of insights there.
Yeah, thank you, Henning. Let's talk about the process now. So everything went well, and we received the parts at the right time at the production line, and we want to process them. And in most of the cases, the process will be a machinery process, and the machine has to be up and running when you need it. If not, what's happening? Imagine you have a production line, you have everything, you have people, you have your parts, and you want to start up your production, but the machine is down. What are you going to do? One option is you will wait until the machine is fixed and then continue producing, but the lost time is going to hit your productivity. The other option is you are not able to fix the machine, whatever the reason is. For example, you don't have the right spare part available. You will need to send your people home and unpaid, and probably you will ask them to come over the weekend to be able to catch up on volume that you just lost. Henning mentioned before, people motivation is key in manufacturing. And if you do that a couple times in a certain time period, your people motivation will be impacted negatively. But the most important question here is, why is the machine down when you need it? Is this because of insufficient maintenance, or your maintenance activities are not effective? So you are not applying the right maintenance strategy to the right equipment or component, and you are working on a firefighting mode continuously. It's the typical situation that we see in manufacturing, and with our maintenance excellence program, we were able to help companies to get out of this situation, this firefighting mode, and improve their production performance and cost situation significantly. Please take a look at the typical results that we were able to achieve during our maintenance excellence projects on the right side of the screen while I turn it back to Henning.
Thanks, you. Appreciate it. So, ladies and gentlemen, the last P is standing for people. And as we all know, people are our most important assets, right? Those are the people who make it happen, basically. But you have to be sure that the people are, understanding what you have in mind, and you have to really make sure that they identify with the target. So if they understand the direction you want to take as a leader of the plant, and if you get them to really identify with that move, and we're going to explain a little bit more how we want to do this, then and only then you have a chance to achieve operational excellence. They need to understand that their behavior is impacting the way how targets can be achieved or not achieved. Starts with attendance, continues with focus on quality, etc. It's something like, you heard the expression, going from a good performing plant to a great performing plant, right? It's the same like as a supplier, if you're running on 1 to 3% return on sales, or if you're running on a great level of 10 to 13%. Makes a big difference, and we believe operational excellence is the key to reach these levels. So you want to make sure that you keep them involved, educated, You want to make sure that you mingle and chat with them. You know, make it a habit after your morning meetings that you walk the lines and build this relation. One thing I learned in all my years running production plants is you will never be able to successfully manage a plant from upstairs, so-called mahogany row, using modern or believing modern management information systems on the walls. You need to be down there on the shop floor with the people, do shop floor management meetings, etc. And this is going to be one of the major keys. Now, if you have exploited all your conversion cost opportunities, right, and you are still not at the point where you are happy with your return on sales, then you need to look to the other side, which is really the parts cost, the BOM cost, the supplier pricing. We are meeting many companies who just don't have the capacity or the talent on board, nor do they think they want to invest in it, to kind of understand how supplier prices are coming together. We believe it is super important that you meet your suppliers on eye level, either as an OEM talking to the tier 1 or as a tier 1 talking to a tier 2. We clearly understand that if you don't have this, then you are at the mercy of the typical 2 to 3% procurement is negotiating for you every year. And while this might bring some cost reduction, you are subject to wild swings in supplier allocation, changing suppliers. There's never going to be this true long-term relationship. So try to get experts on board which help you to train your people to be able to better understand supplier parts pricing and how you can successfully influence them and still maintain a relation. Hand it over back to Thomas.
Yeah, it's not a secret that the automotive industry is changing at an even faster rate every year. And by the way, this is also true for many other industries. What used to be a safe bank to build something for decades has become now a question mark overnight. Especially with the rising electrification in cars and trucks, they become simpler in content, basically with less parts to manufacture, as well as with different demands on processes, on the people, and on the parts. If your company has successfully casted aluminum blocks for decades and aluminum heads, you have become maybe the market leader, you then suddenly realize, your business may no longer be needed to that extent. And that's when companies often struggle to reinvent themselves and jump on the train that we call nowadays disruption. They need basically their capable leadership to imagine a world outside this cylinder blocks and cylinder heads. They often need professional guidance via proven approaches to inspire creativity in order to define tomorrow's portfolio that is future-proof. And this is where ConMoto can help companies to ensure successful marketability and drive down launch costs. Henning, back to you.
Thanks, Thomas. So, ladies and gentlemen, we want to take you a little bit on a ride into a typical production plant. And let's assume that this is a plant here in the south, somewhere in the southeast of the United States. In this plant, it's a heavy-duty truck plant. So in 2 shifts, 150 trucks, heavy rigs are produced every day. 200 trailers of freight, which you see on the right side parked, are coming in every day, which have to be received and then brought to the lines, etc. 2,500 employees are working in this plant. And the plant is set up basically as a typical automotive setup with body, chassis, paint, and assembly. And even though many of the issues which we talked about initially are observed, there's still tons of challenges, I can guarantee you. So this used to be my last assignment here before I joined ConMoto. And the question is always, how do you get those 2,500 people to get on board, right? I mean, yes, you have to basically satisfy the requirements of your boss, the COO. You have to be satisfying the requirements of the dealers and customers out there in terms of quality and on-time delivery. But to really make it happen, there's one big team, who needs to fulfill these requirements, and this is your team, right? And in this case, 2,500 people, not everybody is shown it, this is just one shift, but those are the people who can make it or break it, right? And there's a very simple equation. Everybody is providing great work in exchange for safe and secure, and I do underline secure working places, long-term working places. So they need the stable income to provide for their families, and you need to be able to understand that you need to really get to know them and treat them as equal team members of your team, and because they are the ones who will help you out in the week, but also on many weekends. Now, how do you really get them on the bandwagon? When you run a plant with your leadership, there's literally, tons of different metrics and levers you have to, pay attention to. But you can't inundate your whole team with that amount of different data, right? So what we figured out, you need really a handful of main criteria to get everybody aligned. And we call it a mantra or a vision. And we want to give you an example on this one. First of all, safety, as we explained earlier, that's where it always starts, right? So you want to clearly, this is one of the main drivers. Second is quality, as we explained. Third is efficiency. Now that's important. It's not enough just to produce parts in a safe environment to the top quality and even to on-time delivery. You need to do it in the most efficient way. We all are very much aware that there's manufacturing competition around the globe. And even though the coronavirus is putting a halt to many long-distance, supply relations, there is, of course, competition there, and competition is not, stopping at certain borders. So, whenever we were in discussions about, producing south of the border, producing in Asia, producing here in the U.S., yes, there might be a difference in the labor cost in different regions. But the amount of labor, or the amount of hours to create something, needs to be definitely competitive, right? There's no way around it. And we'll help you a little bit with ideas to get to this point. The fourth point directly is Great Place to Work. And this is Great Place to Work embodies everything which team members appreciate being there. We have seen too many plants where you have insufficient social areas, where there's no healthy food delivered, or not even a cafeteria or whatnot. There's insufficient attention to ergonomics and workplace design, and it's just not conducive to make people want to work there, right? So you want to drive in everything you do to make it a great place to work, and that ultimately extends into recognition, into appreciation for your people. And these are things you have to actively practice. Now, production system is something everybody has learned since the early 1990s, when the first transplants and Toyota were coming ashore here in the US and worldwide. And really, we will talk about those items, everything we have learned about the lean manufacturing tools. Number 6 is stability. We talked about this. And if all this, ladies and gentlemen, is coming together, then and only then you can really aspire to thrive for secure workplaces. And this is something, again, what the overall team is appreciating. So this is something you need to really develop with your team, with your leadership team. You need to promote it. You need to show it in all kinds of opportunities. You need to, make it part of your town hall presentations. You need to get everybody rallied around that theme, their plant, their mantra. Okay. So besides the big team, there's also a smaller subset, which is your leadership team, right? And these are the functional leaders. They are your extension, basically, your arms and ears and brains and mouths into the plant, right? So you want to make sure that you have simply the very best available. There's really no room for experiments or, can train them to that point or whatever. You need to have functional people who have really learned their trade the hard way, so to say, have really learned it over experience. And then if that is the case, you can rely on the performance on each and everybody, he or she will know his or her numbers, which is very important. We'll talk about it. Those type of teams are meeting twice a day and exchanging, and we'll talk about it in shop floor management. But again, some of you might have been in Detroit this year at the Supplier Association, in December 2019, as a matter of fact. And we had Jim Collins speaking there, who is the author of Good to Great. And he said a very pointed sentence. He said, like, it does not matter if you, as the leader, know the direction. It matters more if you have the right people on your bus. So we know how, you know, changing the world is and how many things can happen. So you want to make sure that you are not alone, that you have the right experts around you, and yeah, being able to steer that ship together. Now there's one more group of people which has come to how can I say, to perception only in the last, well, 20 years, I'd say 20, 25 years. Remember the old days, specifically the old way of building cars and trucks, where young folks after university were thrown into the water basically in a sink or swim mode, basically to be a young supervisor, and then eventually walk them up to be assistant and then managers maybe and directors. Since the onset of the transplants, we have a new level of management, the so-called hourly team leaders. Those are the ladies and gentlemen in the royal blue shirts who are just being given a presentation here. Those are leaders who are still hourly, but they represent between 7 and 15 hourly colleagues in the different production areas. They are leading them daily. They are supporting them. They are doing the morning huddles. They are, you know, educating them on the KPI achievements in their area. Those are the ladies and gentlemen who really make a difference, together with the supervisors, if you will achieve your targets or not. So make sure, again, that these so-called transmission belts here, that they are feeling involved, that they are feeling recognized, and that they are also truly empowered. They need to be able to make their own decisions and you know, let them do the work. Now, if all this comes into fruition, I want to just give you one example. If you take a plant in this perspective, and if you run it for about a year, 1.5 years, then these improvements, as you can see here, are possible, right? And I'm not going through all the points, but if you just, you know, pay attention to the upper left, which is the hours per vehicle, so the amount of hours, labor hours you spent to build, in average, one heavy-duty truck. We took that plant from 163 initially to 120. And so that shows you the sheer magnitude, 40 hours. And if you want to put it in financial terms, just consider that maybe a total hour in that business is roughly $40, full cost, fully fringed. So 40 times 40, do it for 150 trucks and multiply it by 220 working days in a year, you're a little bit over 50 million in savings. So that is the magnitude, the factor of what's possible. So we haven't even talked about quality and field warranty reductions and all these things. So if you decide to bring your business to operational excellence, there's a significant lever which can be achieved. Now, one more slide I want to show you is when we talk about operational excellence, and we talk about production systems and so on, you have probably seen and read, you know, these typical, you know, the Toyota temple or soccer ball or whatever, all kinds of designs. Honestly, over the last 20, 25 years, these are the main items I have come to believe in. And I really think that each of them represents what it takes to bring a plant from good to great. And we were going to show you a couple of examples now. But these 9 principles is something which really puts power behind your words, so to say, and gets everybody involved, you know, and leads to really nice development of KPIs. Now, shop floor management is one. We often hear the term shop floor management, and when we go into customer plants, we often see that you know, how shop floor management is interpreted just from the word itself. Now, let me tell you something. Shop floor management is certainly not to be out on the shop floor in the midst of the noise of the machines and AGVs going by and people talking and whatever, and trying to understand what the gentleman on the board or the lady is presenting at this point of time. That's not shop floor management in the truest sense. It's also not about just hanging up charts where you have, you know, track lines or where you have bar charts or whatever, and just, you know, promoting to management how organized you are. That's also not shop floor management. Shop floor management is really to find 2 or 3 times per day the opportunity it can be and it should be on the shop floor, but in a closed setting, to have a calm, cool, and relaxed discussion with your leadership team. Where have we been? You typically do it an hour after the beginning of the first shift and an hour after the beginning of the second shift, because you want to reflect on what has happened in the morning. Do we have everything under control? How is the trend of the day? And if you see, for instance, this gentleman on the right side, he's just reporting out. He's leading a cap assembly line. He's reporting out on the values. And just by looking at the upper KPI chart for whatever that represents, but it's mostly green and 1 red. So you can already, at a glance, I always say at a glance, recognize that this gentleman has that part of his business well under control. If you look to the right side, and you might have to move my picture a little bit, but that is more red than green or evenly, so there's something to look at. But important is, now, even though he is having mostly green, there's always deviators or interrupters, hindering him from being all green. So here in a Pareto, he's referring to what are the main items, and they, of course, dynamically change. Important is that's still not enough. Knowing these ones who are impacting this leads ultimately to there's a problem-solving PDCA action needed. So if you want to remember one thing from shop floor management, make it calm, make it collected, make it to be reflective, so to say, of what you do. But then for every KPI, always this 3 steps. What's the KPI achievement? What are the issues, keeping you from achieving it, so to say, the impactors, as I say, and what's the problem solving? Okay, before you actually can embark on your KPIs, you need to define with your leadership team what kind of targets do you want to really achieve in the next year, and at what level of improvement or decline your flight paths from current state to future state, from January to December, are going to be. Many people do this and they define it. They might even align on the level of improvement. But that's, ladies and gentlemen, that's absolutely not enough. Most important is, and that's why we like this Hoshin-Kanri process, is that you are finding activities who are the so-called enabling activities. And you see them on the lower left side. These are activities which will help you and your team in that specific area to improve, in this case, quality. And they typically encompass all the pain points of the area. So as much as these things turn over the year green, the likelihood of achieving the future state targets is increasing. So that's what you do at the beginning of the year. Now, in order to really achieve it, you need to do every day a check, right? Nothing is more aggravating if you are letting your KPIs run for the months and then 3 days after the books close, your controller comes to you and tells you how much you missed your targets. That is just sheer frustration and aggravation because you can't change it anymore. This is why we recommend to do it each and every day and make it very clear either you're green or red. But if you do go into red territory, try to come up with measures to make it the next opportunity already green again. There's not a lot of chances to make up for. If you do this, then you are able month by month to achieve your targets. You may not always be on the green, but you will go in the right direction. And remember one thing. If you do catch the hourly target, for instance, by hourly board tracking, then you have a chance to catch the shift target. If you do track the shift target, you'll catch the day, you'll catch the week, the months, you will achieve your annual targets. If you don't catch these things, there's only very little room for making it up. And if you do force your people an extended weekend work to make up, they will eventually get tired and let you down on Mondays or Fridays, which is again detrimental. So very specific, and that's what we wanted to convey here on the KPI tracking. Hand it back to Thomas.
So far, we heard a lot about SQDCM, about the 3 Ps in a broad way, but also some tools. And I want to just show you another tool that is necessary, I think, in the world of the people, and that's standard work. You need to envision a typical automotive factory is about, let's say, 400 people in the assembly shop per shift. And that's 400 hands that see a car every 75 seconds or so, and there are processes to be assembled right, wire harnesses to be connected properly, tools to be applied, and so on and so forth. So there's a gazillion or a high amount of processes that need to go right every time. And I have a little analogy for you. On the top left, you see probably 5-year-old boys and girls. They are running after the ball. We used to call that mock ball. Everybody just wants to kick the ball as hard as possible, as far as possible, and ideally into the other's goal. Now, are we going to be successful with that in a higher league like MLS or UEFA or somewhat? Probably not. You do have to have a strategy, or better, each position needs to have its roles and responsibilities clarified. It's one example. The goalkeeper, of course, shouldn't try and go out and try to shoot goals into the opponent's goal. He should stay and be protecting his own goal, and so on and so forth. And what you usually see when we go into plants, you have the approach of the mock ball that's on the left, that everybody, all hands on deck, need to go after the issue of the day or of the hour and get it done, which is right at that moment. But it doesn't allow you to identify or differentiate between what's normal and what's abnormal. If you have standardized work that's usually written down and also readily available at the workstation, then you know what's normal. I need to drill in this screw with a screwdriver, 2.5 Newton meters plus minus 10%. And if that works, it's fine. I can release the product to the next process. If something goes wrong, the screw doesn't bottom out, I need to raise my hand. And then a team leader or first level supervisor, the people in the royal blue, as Henning has pointed out, they would come and help me with that situation. So the standard work element, if you will, allows a differentiation between normality and abnormality, and allows later on with problem-solving technology or techniques, if you will, a systematic waste elimination. With that, back to Henning.
Thanks, Thomas. So standard work, as Thomas pointed it out, is also very relevant to improve continuous improvement, right? You can only improve if you have a defined standard. Otherwise, you are just, reinventing the wheel all the time. Continuous improvement, again, is the way to get, after the fluff in the system, right? And when I mean fluff is, when manual labor is done, there's, truly value-add activities which you need to perform to get the product done, but there's also non-value-add activities who are just happening because you have not optimized the process. And you often hear about the term, we don't want you to work harder, so we don't want you to break a sweat, but we want you to work smarter. And the question is always, how do you motivate everybody to, release the fluff in the system? And of course, who knows best about the potential savings are the operators who do it every day. So sometimes you have the notion that people don't want to release the extra time in the system for their own good. But again, if you have a mantra which everybody supports and which is reconsidered each and every day an opportunity that people want to go for secure workplaces, then they will actually rally behind it. And now, modern technologies have brought many opportunities here. Some of you might remember the old day in the 1990s, etc., when you come to a plant and they were real proud about having a Yamazumi, this red and green bar charts with little magnet stripes cut out basically, and shown, how they have level balanced the line. This was all good at the time, but the problem is it was so cumbersome to do it that it was a one and only dog and pony show event. And then afterwards, it were rarely updated. Today, modern technologies using digital cameras and the software programs, they allow you to film and movie edit, literally, the sequence of work, put them into non-value add, value add, and then try to find where do I have peaks and valleys along my line in terms of work content, and then level it out. And by this, you also, reduce the amount of workplaces and, of course, labor. So just to give you an idea, that was in a unionized facility. In our assembly shop, we had 450 people per shift, and we were able in a year to take about 60 of these people out by applying these processes. And again, in a unionized environment, right, where normally the brothers and sisters are protecting the workplaces. So this resembles what is possible. One more item on quality. When you talk about quality, you might have heard about the term quality feedback loops. There's 6 of them, and they really describe the way how you systematically, from the initial operator self-check all the way to a happy customer at the end, kind of go through the steps of checking quality. Now, from the operator, then there's the buddy next station who's checking your work. Then after a handful of stations, there's a quality gate, which you see in the middle section, the 2 pictures. I always favor if these things are done manually, at least initially, because you want to have a human brain in between, somebody who is understanding what's happening, somebody who's feeding it back to the relevant stations and team leaders. But if you become more professional, you can go to displays and you can use tablets or to mark down, tally what has happened along the line and use the data better. Ultimately, most important is with all these steps that you do apply robust problem solving in a PDCA check, as the gentleman in the lower left is doing. And then once you believe you have issues taken care of and they should not reappear, don't just believe it, but do a check for at least half a year, so 24 months, weeks basically of checking. Has that issue truly not come back? If it is really green, then you might as well take it off the list. But I'm telling you from my own experience, many things we believe are okay, but they are still not completely understood. Hand it back to Thomas.
Yeah, I'd like to give you another analogy. Obviously, today is, for me at least, the day of analogies. You see here the US Air Space, if you will, on a typical Sunday last September, Sunday afternoon, I think it was before I was flying out to a customer. There's usually about 42,000 airplanes in the air on any given day. And what I would like to state is we do usually feel pretty confident that the plane makes it at the right time to the right place and with us safe and sound. That's maybe right now not the case, but in general, before Corona, this is what we were able to say. Now let's compare that with a automotive or manufacturing situation. If you go to the next slide, Henning, please. Then you see we have a couple of factories. Each of them has an ERP system. That's a legacy system like SAP. And they're being fed by many, many suppliers, 200 to 300 usually. And this feeding of parts, as I outlined earlier, is happening in many different ways, through many different countries and continents. It can be, through trucks, through ships, through airplanes at times, in emergencies, hopefully. It can be a sequence, which is a JIS part, just in sequence. It can be a JIT, just in time part. And typically, each of the plants in the range of about 300,000 units a year, they get a day about 160,000 so-called handling units. A handling unit can be one container with one part in it, or many containers with many parts, same part number in them. And the question is, how much control do we usually see in the factories of the OEMs as well as the tier ones? If you go to the next page. And this is a picture none of us wants to see. Lately, we have seen over the last 2 to 3 years trends that the launches in the automotive world don't go so well. And that's typically seen in the relationship between the OEMs and the part suppliers. These 2 top pictures, these are about 40,000 new cars over a launch period of 6 months parked because parts were missing, parts were not functioning well, or parts had a different geometry level, and so on and so forth. These cars were basically not sellable at that time. And then, of course, you can imagine what is happening. This is a high stress situation for all participants, suppliers and OEMs alike. We have also outsourced processes, so where third parties come into place in sequencers, in warehouse management, and so on and so forth. And many, many times we have seen now that this ends up in court, and at the end costs a lot of money, which doesn't help anybody because there's no additional car being built because of that. So if you go to the next slide, what we see in the airplane industry is there's lots of controls. There's a control tower, or many towers over the countries. They have well-established educational programs for the pilots. There's a co-pilot, there's a backup, they have automatic flying, autopilot, something the automotive industry is trying to accomplish. And it's well taken care of. Now in the industry, automotive or manufacturing, you see more what's happening that's on that poster in the middle of a movie from 1940, Flying Blind. But I think to our rescue lately is coming the issue of Industry 4.0 or Internet of Things, that not anymore just the talk is happening, but also the implementation. We have teamed up with a few companies as collaborations to enable basically putting the Internet of Things in place and have a transparent supply chain. That means, for instance, that we can identify where's what container at any given time. Is it full? Is it empty? Is it needed elsewhere? Is it coming late because of the truck being late on the road? There might have been an accident of sorts. Now on the next page, I want to give you some more details. You know, this track and trace, for instance, can happen with RFID technology, that's radio frequency, either active or passive. It can be Bluetooth. There's many technologies out there now. And the typical example where we have implemented is seen on the top. And that is that the automotive body shop where we implemented track and trace technology, we were able to reduce the invest by about $12 million. There's a normal fleet size for the body shop of 60 million. And just by applying these sensors, if you will, and little signal senders, we were able to reduce the invest. But not only that, we were also able to balance the supply chain. And that means that the right quantity of containers is at the right location, be it full or empty. Now in the field of GIS, just in sequence, that's in the middle, we have another application that's in the area of ASN. It's Advanced Shipping Notices. That's a protocol usually governed by the BDA 4913 standard, which it has strict, let's say, syntax, how to convey that information from supplier to OEM and vice versa. And this has been a very difficult and cumbersome and costly situation. A typical ASN implementation used to cost $700,000 to $900,000. It used to take 7 to 12 months to implement. And if you are a very small outfit in the industry, then this is a pretty heavy cost. Now we have reached a threshold with one of our collaboration companies where we can reduce this cost tremendously, as well as the implementation time can be down to a standard 2 weeks or even a couple of days. This is all possible through web services and web-based applications. Last but not least, on the bottom, what this, let's say, supply chain transparency at the end delivers to all of us, be it supplier or OEM, is on-time delivery. That, you know, most of the time the shipment do arrive in time, or you do know ahead of time if something goes wrong and you have to charter a plane or change your production sequence to adapt to the new situation. Handing back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. So ladies and gentlemen, now we would like to bring one more example here before we start to close, but this is about supplier challenges, right? And GACC has worked on a number of different supplier improvements, and he will describe to you guys, you know, a typical example of how he and his team were able to get an automotive supplier turnaround. GACC, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Henning. So I would like to give you some more detail on one of our typical turnaround projects. Let's start with the facts and figures so you have a better picture what kind of and what size of plant we are talking about. The plant is located in South Carolina in the United States. It's a supplier for premium automotive and truck customers. Yearly revenue more than $300 million and roughly 950 employees at the plant. Now, if you look at the photo in the background in more detail, you will see that was taken at the beginning of our project or in the assessment session. You will see how bad the situation was on the shop floor. It's definitely not state of the art what we see today in manufacturing. And if we go to the top section, you will see that this bad situation is reflecting exactly the key performance indicators. So let's start with return on sales, minus 15% as we started with $300 million sales per year. It means this plant burned $45 million cash at the end of the year. On-time delivery, 91%. It means you are delivering premium OEMs in truck and automotive. Sooner or later, you are going to stop their production line, and it's not acceptable. Backlog in average $10 million that's an unrealized revenue that you are carrying throughout the year. And for service part, at the end, it's a lost revenue because your competitors will realize this revenue and you are not able to keep up and deliver. Scrap more than 6%, $300 million on sales. It means $18 million that you just throw away by producing your parts for your customers. Expedite freight, more than 7% on sales, which means once you are in backlog, at some point, every single shipment to your customer will be expedite freight or expedite charter flight. And at the end, it's gonna cost you a lot of money. Inventory loss, it's one of my highlights, unfortunately, in a negative way, because I have never seen something like that before. What it means, you think that you have this material in the system or in your plant, and at the end of the year, with the physical inventory, you recognize you just don't have it. It's lost. The material is lost. Raw material, finished goods, you don't have it anymore. And the last but not least, it's the turnover, employee turnover, 8% per month, which means it's 96% in one full year. So which means, again, you are almost exchanging your entire team within 1 year. And this is one of the key drivers why you are in such a bad situation.
Now, Giza, you have done with your team a couple of these or a numerous amount of turnarounds. Yeah. Would you consider that this is a typical starting situation?
Definitely, it's a typical start, and we see the same problems. And I can tell you this is not the worst one that we have seen.
Okay. You wanted to show us a couple of the things you typically recommend and what your team does to turn around, right?
So the question will be, how do you fix it? So first of all, you start with the leadership team, effective leadership. So there are two streams or two steps. The first one is you look at the structure, and you need to make sure that the structure is effective, or your leaders can lead their team members effectively. What we are seeing typically is the organization or the structure is grown over years, and it's not enabling an effective leadership. Once it's fixed, you go to the next level and you make sure that you have the right people at the right position. So it's done. You can move to the next level, and that's going to be supervisors and team leaders. Supervisors and team leaders is definitely key for your success. As long as they are not on the same page with you or on the same boat, you will never get there. Your supervisors, you need to share with them your targets, your financial targets, your KPIs. They will own it. And your team leaders will deliver you hour by hour, shift by shift, and day by day, your volume on the shop floor. The next one will be improve material flow. Why is this so important? It's a typical situation when we start a project and look at the processes that they are really tight. We are asking the question, hey, why we are not able to make the volume? And in most of the cases, we put a Pareto chart and the first bar is missing material. And we have two streams there. The first one is you don't get your part from your suppliers into your warehouse on time. The other stream is you have the material in your warehouse, but you are not able to bring it to the production line on time. And that's causing a lot of problems and your volume achievement is gone. If we go to the next one, it's going to be flawless product launch. Even a stable supplier can get into a trouble during a launch period. If you are already in trouble, in a bad situation, and you have an important product launch with OEM, premium OEM, you need to control it very, very tight. Once you miss the ramp up line, you will never get there and it's going to cost you a lot of money. It means at the right time, you need to put the right team and you need to put the right resources and make sure you keep up with OEM's ramp up plan. And if please go to the next one, optimize plant capacity. At some point, you will see that you have couple bottlenecks in the plant that you can just solve with performance improvements, which means you don't have to produce every single program in the plant. If there's an opportunity, you can move this program to another plant and you can relieve the situation in your troublemaker plant. Just do it. It can be just one program that's going to be an easy run, but in some circumstances, it's going to be a group of products or programs that you will need to move to other plants. Then you can talk about a bigger footprint project. Next one, please. Onboarding and training. So 8% turnover per month in a tight labor market situation means that you are not going to be able to hire experienced labor from the market. So 50%, at least 50% of the employees that you hire are very young and they have never been in a manufacturing plant. The question is here, how can you bring them? How do you bring them up to speed within 1 week? So once they hit the shop floor, they can perform, do the job safely and with a higher productivity. Quality mindset. So Henning mentioned the advanced quality feedback loops. But in such a project or environment, we can talk about the advanced quality feedback loops. We start with the basics. What we rolled out here was basic quality principles like piece inspection, or you need to label every single suspected material, or you need to apply quality stop when you see a deviation in your process. With those basics, we were able to reduce the scrap rate by 50%. And last but not least, how do you make sure that the improvements that you were able to achieve will be sustainable? And we closed the loop, improvement loop with the shop floor management and turned this organization to a self-sustained organization.
All right, let's take a look at the improvements here. Significant. So maybe, Gizai, from my side, what I've seen is it was not just amazing how quickly your team was able to identify the issues here, but also how substantial the improvements really are. And if you take a look compared to what we saw in the first picture, it is a completely different world here. So this is what we typically bring to the table. You know, the onset is often very much the same. The tools are well understood, proven set of systems, and then, you know, our teams are coming in. Important is it is always together with the local leadership. So we want to make sure that there's a learning and an appreciation and that they can take it from there. Also, one thing we know that while some, you know, plants or many plants are owned by independent, you know, big organizations, there's still a number of companies who are owned by private equity, and we know what the ownership cycle is. And this, you know, there's always the need for quick turnaround and quick improvement. So yes, we can do the quick thing basically in a couple of weeks, bring it to a certain level. But if you want to truly go for improvement of the whole value chain and make it operational excellence, it'll take time. And that's something where we'd like to train, you know, the local leadership. Thank you, Gizai. Much appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm coming to the last slide now. Corona is on everybody's mind. It is, you know, creating havoc on our personal lives. It's endangering our lives and our families, but it also, you know, completely is changing how we think about business now. And it is very concerning. We talk in our leadership level every day about the situation in the industry and how long a economy, basically a country, a global economy, can sustain being off work. So one thing is clear: we don't know how long this, you know, closed factories and people staying at home will stay. But for sure, there will be a time when we all have to ramp back up. And so the thing is, we know that this is for many companies a completely new situation. We also know that cash is tight these days. So from our perspective, also a little bit as a give back, we are offering our approach. We come in basically with teams. We offer a free plant assessment. We looked jointly at our cost control situation. We'll take a look at your supply chain and evaluate if you are ready to ramp up and help you with that in itself. And typically when we do these things, we also find, of course, a number of you know, run rate, P&L relevant savings potentials. So this is a little bit our proposal for you. If you feel alone, if you think you might need some expertise to help you with the new situation, and if you like what you saw, you know, give us a call and let us know if we can help you here. And again, we come in for free initially to get you going there. Now, Q&A session. Let's see, we gave you the number to send questions. Let me see, Suzanne, if we had some questions coming up. Yeah, I got one question here from Christiane, calling in from Plymouth, Michigan. How do you deploy technology enhancements, in a minute, and, oops, that went away, and tools in your solution? I'll hand it over to Thomas. How do you deploy technology enhancements and tools into your solution?
Well, maybe she had in mind what I said with our collaboration partners in the track and trace. As I said, we have companies with whom we worked a couple of projects, and we know this is plug and play. So the example I gave, maybe let's go through that once more. The body shop and the 60 million. We did a study first on one set of containers. And applied our sensors, applied our technology, and did a test for 1 or 2 weeks in real life situation. And that rendered very positive, and then we had a rollout. And of course, before we came in, we went through all the questions that all the departments usually have. That's, you know, in operations, what is your uptime? What is your compatibility with existing legacy systems, and so on and so forth. So maybe the answer is we do have proven technology on the market. You know, that's not just talk. That is true implementation success. And we go through a proof of concept. Yeah, small enough that it doesn't disrupt your system, but big enough that it allows for the next step. The rollout to, as I said, maybe one shift first, and then to 1 week, and so on and so forth. And that's what we have done in most of the projects that I've been involved, that we go in with this new technology and create trust with the tryout and the proof of concept. I hope that did answer your question.
Thank you, Thomas. There's another question from Peter Wallace. Peter is asking, states and countries seem to be seeking to mobilize manufacturing to supply the much needed medical supplies. How can we as experts in cost effectively increase the output and decrease the waste, assist in these efforts? That's a very good question, Peter. As a matter of fact, that was one of the first things when we heard about the situation on the ventilator side. Company Ventec we have been in contact with, where now GM is also stepping in. That is of course something where there's a need right now to effectively apply the same tools. Doesn't really matter what kind of products they're after, but the way how you produce applies to the principles what we have shown today. And besides medical devices, and we are also looking into healthcare in itself. You know, if you think about the way how the US healthcare system is structured, there's a lot of room for improvement. And this is something where the operational excellence community, companies like us and others, are effectively helping them to get their material flow, to get their availability, to get everything flowing in a better and more effective way. And it very much resonates with what we heard today. So very good question. There will be more in this arena here. Let me see. There's another question here from Frank out of Detroit. After Corona, how do you think will the supply chain change after the crisis? I hand this over to Thomas.
I think a very good question. The short answer is no one knows. But we have already indications that Corona has affected since weeks, at least in the areas where we are monitoring, that's the Americas and Europe. We've seen shortages of overseas containers. These are the containers that you see on the ships. They are standard sizes. And probably because of the effect that Corona had in the beginning, that some companies were still building while others were idling or lower capacity, that you know, an effect like LTL on the road, you know, less than trailer load did happen. But these containers were not fully loaded, if you will, and the need for those containers did rise up to 30%. At least that's the last I heard. Now, what's easily to be predicted is that a whiplash effect will take into place once everybody wants to be up and running after Corona. And that is that, you know, demands on containers, but also container ships, on airplanes, on trucks, on trains, on transportation companies will go way above their capacity. Just like we see right now with the ventilators and the medical equipment that is needed. And the question is then, you know, how is that demand or that capacity that exists distributed? How is it allocated in the most effective way? Which brings me to an outlook that in about 2 weeks, we intend to have another webinar to exactly talk about that in general. You know, how does the time look like when companies want to ramp up in the time after Corona? We do have developed at the moment a 7-step plan, you know, that we want to roll out and to more discuss with you rather than present with you. So be in the lookout. In about 2 weeks from now, we will host another webinar. But I hope the original answer about the supply chain was answered in a certain way.
Thank you, Thomas. Appreciate it. There's another question from John from Lexington, Kentucky. John is asking, supplier turnaround, the example which was presented, how many weeks do you typically need to assess the status of a plant? I give it to Gisai.
Yeah, thank you, Henning. Typically, we need 3 to 5 days to see the pain points, and after 3 to 5 days, we are able to put a enhanced roadmap and improvement plan for you. So, and which shows you how you can get out of this situation. 3 to 5 days.
All right. And maybe one thing to add basically is we are using, of course, standard evaluation schemes like the along the VDA 6.3 or IATF audit schemes. We are looking to apply those questions as guiding questions, but a subset of this is our ConMoto very own rapid plant assessment, which again, as Giza said, is leading to a rather clear picture of what is possible and what can be saved. Let's see. Another question comes from Janet from Cleveland. She's asking, how relevant is remote work? Well, I mean, Janet, you see this currently, the very fact that we are meeting today, not in a reception in Charlotte, but that we are meeting via this Zoom for the first time as a webinar, is certainly an example, but we see it all over the place. I mean, all the customers we are talking these days with, they all are engaging, of course, in work from home, but also in, resolving issues from home. And I very much believe that there will be a new level of acceptance that remote work is going to be effective, and companies will be much more open for remote working places, not because they seem to have to offer it, but because they believe it's effective and it might even save them cost going forward. So including our work, when we engage with customers, and even these days when we can't visit, we offer remote assessments, we offer remote leadership, workshops where we work with them on modern multimedia tools and jointly figure out a solution. And this is to the benefit of our customers because we can show up the best experts from the globe and save them a ton of travel costs. So very much, Janet, we believe that this is going to be very relevant. There's a question from Mark from Bentonville, Arkansas. Mark is asking, how is Industry 4.0 impacting the future operations? I give it to Tom.
As I mentioned, I think Industry 4.0 will be one enabler. We right now go through quite a bit of transition, disruption. Corona, in my perception, has just accelerated these trends, if you will, the electrification in automotive, the home office work, and so on and so forth. I see Industry 4.0 an enabler if it's used wisely and appropriately. I observe a lot of talk, but not too much work, and that's where, as I said earlier, we come into play. We have successfully implemented in a plug-and-play fashion, by the way, Industry 4.0. So I cannot envision a time, especially also after Corona, without Industry 4.0 as an enabler, not as a cost driver that is for some IT outfit somewhere in this world, but as a true enabler. If I know, for instance, how many products I have in-house, I know how much I need to order that can be reduced to currently. If I know where my containers are on the other side of the world, I have much more forecast than if I don't know that. So Industry 4.0, I think, is a necessity for us, all of us in the future, to be cost competitive and to be transparent.
Thank you, Thomas. We got a great question from Christoph from Detroit. Christoph is asking, are spreadsheets and manual KPI generation on the shop floor still commonly observed among your clients? And that is a wonderful question. I thank you for that, Christoph. Now, this thing is, if I look throughout my career, really starting as a young engineer in the late 80s to leading plants then in the late 90s and then 2000s, of course, it all started manually, but at a certain point of time, we realized that more and more digital tools were coming into the operational areas, and you see more and more companies adopting this and trying to to program ways of displaying data directly, best even sensing data from failure measuring into visual displays, etc. While this is all good and might be, how can I say, easy to further utilize and condense and slice and dice data, there's one major danger with this. The danger is that you often have the missing human brain in between. Because it's not about displaying the data, it's really about finding a solution to the underlying disruptors or disruptors here. You know, those are impactors, those issues which are keeping you from achieving your target line, they need to be understood and they need to be addressed. And I have seen in my career many plants, internal and external, and sometimes you have these groups of people who are proudly presenting their digital wall and how every data is automatically integrated. But if you really look behind the scenes, you realize that many issues are not properly tracked. So my personal stance is, if you can measure it, do it, but do it manual first, get a clear understanding with the team, you know, what we are talking about here. And if eventually you can then refrain to a solution of maybe, you know, tele tablets or whatever, then it might be you know, meaningful also. But it's a great question, you know, and every company has to find the right approach, but be careful that the interpretation of the underlying issue is not getting lost here.
Henning, maybe I can add something to your comments. In one of my last projects, we implemented a digital shop floor board. It's SQDC board. It was paperless. And it was I would say, good mix of digital and also the old way, how you run a shop floor board. And it worked very, very well. And the success was, I would say, to see after the implementation.
All right, thank you, Gisela. So let's see, what else do we have? There's one more question from Zhang in Zhang, I believe, Zhang in Irvine, California. He's asking, are you guys working on a success-based fee? Zhang, good question. Definitely. Like many other competitors, we are working on a success-based fee. The only thing with this is that in most cases when we offer this, our customers after a while realize that they would better be advised to go with a regular rate, actually, because it's not necessarily in their favor. We tend to be rather confident on what we do and get the performance of many companies up. So yes, we offer it, but we often see that companies are reverting back to a regular daily fee. Let's see, what else? Any other questions here? There's one more question coming in from Jessica from Birmingham. Okay, so you have presented, she said, how are you guys different from other consultants? Well, I mean, first of all, we are not necessarily considering us as consultants. We are really experts because we have learned our trade. We have been in your shoes. We have had leadership functions in the industry. And that's, I believe, what sets us apart. We want to be considered as an eye-to-eye partner to our customers and you know, provide you with quick insights. You will not find us providing big, you know, data analysis or you know, large decks which you are supplied after weeks of work and thousands of dollars. We are very hands-on, and as Gisela said, after 2-3 days, we already have a pretty good insight with your leadership team of what needs to change and where are the savings potential. So that probably sets us a little bit apart. Okay, I believe that was the last so far. Suzanne, there's no other question coming in right now. If there's no more questions, then again, we appreciate the time you spent with us, basically. We are available to you know, check with our office, basically, and ask for the material, of course. And as Thomas said, we are planning to do a follow-up meeting where we'll talk about the time after the corona and the launch, and we would be happy to see you again. So we wish all of you a great day. Thanks for chiming in, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.